Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I'm privileged to have a good friend and a very senior finance professional from the US, George Bickerstaff. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you. George is the co-founder and managing director of Dillon Investment Bank, focused on healthcare and technology. He is the founder of the Global Leaders Network. He has been the chief financial officer of Novartis. He's a board member of several public companies. He's chairman of the International Vaccine Institution in Seoul, and he's vice chair of the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. What an incredible career, George. So, George, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your career or your life?
Well, I think about things in two dimensions. The first is along a calendar, a timeline. And of course, on those big things, it's get out of college to get a job and then sort of settle down and have a family. And those seem to run in about 10 to 20-year segments. I'm sort of in the third segment right now. And so for each of those are key milestones because you have to change each time you do that. From the career side, it was from being an engineer into finance, then taking leadership positions in companies, and then sitting on multiple boards where you have to influence people. You can't tell them what to do. You have to influence them.
Correct. So let's talk of Dillon now. You're focused on healthcare and technology, very large areas and incredible potential. What are some of the key metrics you look for before considering an investment?
Well, the first thing we look at is the management team strong? So has the management team done what they're going to do before? Do they have a proven track record? Do they have all the right people, for example, sales or marketing or production or finance? Are they on board at that time? The second thing you look at is do they have a good board of directors? And it's actually in this order. And the board of directors help to govern you, keep you within the guardrails per se. The third thing you look at is do they have good investors that can stay along, not just our own investment, but others as well. The fourth, ironically, is the business model. Does the business model make sense? And finally, the last is can our networks help them to become successful? So it's 5 points.
Very wonderful. And when you go in with an investment, what is the time horizon that you normally look at?
We're typically looking at companies that have a demonstrated model. So some companies are startups. We're not really good at that. Some companies are public. There's other people better than that. So we're normally looking at someone in still a private round going to a public round, sometimes called a crossover. So that's sort of the size.
Okay.
And when you look at typical investments with people, you're typically looking out 5 to 7 years is the time frame to get to where you want to go.
And you must be working with a lot of startup entrepreneurs. At what stage, based on your experience, should a startup entrepreneur start looking for external funding? I mean, how long should a person bootstrap?
Well, let me tell you the 3 cardinal rules of business and finance. The first cardinal rule, this is the most important, is don't run out of money. The second cardinal rule is don't run out of money. And the third cardinal rule is don't run out of money.
Okay.
So you have to be thinking about that all the way along the line. And investors sort of tier up. And as you're getting ready for bigger investors, you have to be organized in a way to do that. But don't run out of money. It ends badly.
Very interesting. And, again, you've dealt with a lot of startup entrepreneurs. So based on your experience, what are some of the basic mistakes a lot of them make?
There's a couple. The first one's normally around the strategy. They'll go into an area that's so unique that they kind of buttonhole themselves down. So they're not seeing, a broad market that they're going to play in. And broad market means it can go across geographies, which is really important. It can go across industries, which is important, and it can matter to different ages of people. So the first mistake they make is by pigeonholing down, The second one that they typically make is not having the right team around them. They feel they can do everything. And so they get to a point where they're lacking the skill sets. And the last one, and this is the fatal one, is they run out of money or they bring in bad investors who take away their company. So it's sort of, there's three: good market, great management, great investors.
Interesting. And again, whenever I speak to private equity, to startup entrepreneurs, they always tell me that our private equity investors put a lot of pressure on us to scale up fast. And when they start scaling up fast, that's where they lose direction. What are your thoughts on scaling up, and when should a startup start looking at scaling up?
Well, there's different theories on this. One theory is, go as quick as you can. Another theory is do it in pragmatic steps. I'd say the key measure you want to look at is, do I have the capital, the cash and people to scale it the way I need to? So you can't scale something super fast if you need to have a lot of plants and facilities because it takes time to build them, or if you don't have the money to do it. So I think you want to have a cadence of scale up as quick as you have the capital, people, and money to do it. And take it from there. I do think you want to go quick because things change quickly, but not so quick that you go broke.
Correct. And a couple more questions on startups before I move to the next segment. I also get a lot of conflicting opinions on whether, from a private equity perspective, a sole founder is good or whether co-founders are good. Your thoughts?
It depends. If those two get along, if they're complementary, it's kind of like a husband and wife. Is it good to be married or not? Well, if they get along well, it's pretty good. If they don't get along, it's pretty bad. So I think it's situational, determinant. But ultimately, you need more people involved to get to something really big. So one person, two people are better than one if they all get along.
Sure. Okay. And one more question. When you make an investment, how involved do you get in the governance of the investee company?
Different people have different philosophies. Mine is get very heavily involved because that fifth point of the five I gave you earlier, people, board, good investors, model, and does my money matter? It's just not money. It's does my network and my experiences matter? And to do that, you really do have to get involved. Some people, like hedge fund guys, will trade in and out of companies because they see a model, they like it, and they could go in and out. My experience is best around helping the company to get there, which means you need to be involved, oftentimes through the board of directors.
Okay. And one more question for Dillon. What are some of the core values you believe in at Dillon?
Well, the most important is you want to be dealing with honest, ethical people. In the financial world, you can find a bunch of them that aren't exactly that. So knowing your customer and dealing with honest, ethical people is by far the most important, whether it's clients or investors or even ourselves.
Okay. So before I come to talking about the Global Leaders Network which you created, I want to ask you a few questions on, board roles. In the part of the world that I live in, the fiduciary responsibility of a non-executive board member is now exactly the same as an executive board member. You sit on several boards. What do you look for before you accept a new position?
If I'm going to join a board, or conversely, if we're going to bring a new board member on, you're looking to, one, make sure the person's honest and ethical, so you check their background. And there are, by the way, very deep background checks that are done. It's not just look at their LinkedIn profile. It's very deep. The second thing is you want somebody that has a deep knowledge of your industry or of a function, for example, finance or science or healthcare. You look for that. And the last one you're looking for is, do you think they can work together collaboratively with the other board members? Because what you don't need to do is have food fights in the boardroom. So being able to get along. So competent, understanding the sector you're in, and honest, ethical, and do you feel they can fit in with management?
So that I agree is the perspective from the organization that is bringing in a board member. From my perspective, who wants to join a board, what kind of transparency should I be looking for?
Complete.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely complete. If one, you should talk to all the other board members and talk to the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you really need to understand their business plan and their financials, because the place you can get in the most trouble is the financial.
Mm-hmm.
Four, you want to talk to their outside public accounting group and to see if there's any issues, and their law firm to see if there's any issues. So you have to go through a deep diligence. Some companies don't like when you do that, and they go, well, he's digging too much. And if a company doesn't like that, I really don't want to be there.
Yep.
But you need to feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, you're financially liable. The duty of loyalty, duty of care.
Because I've heard some amazing stories, some horror stories of friends of mine who went and joined, large listed companies, and then found after they joined that the promoter had, their hand in the till. And, these non-executive board members got into serious trouble. I mean, I've often wondered, how do you find out that there is a problem?
Well, you don't always know. It's like the analogy of there's good apples and bad apples. Mm-hmm. And of course, you want to be good apples. But if you take a good apple and you put it in a difficult situation, like leave it in hot sun too long, it turns into a bad apple. Mm-hmm. So even though everything's okay when you start, the situation can change, that people get into trouble. So you have to have a good governance process and internal control process to identify problems. And for sure they're going to happen. Then you just need to sort it out, take care of it, and move on.
Fascinating. So George, let's talk now about the Global Leaders Network. You created it. What was your hypothesis when you decided to create such a powerful network?
I put this together about 15 years ago. Initially started myself, and then brought in some other friends that had a similar interest. And the basic model, the thesis was that people can be better if they connect with other people, share knowledge, information, and insights, and evolve. So connect, share, evolve. And that was the principle. And at that time, tools were coming along like LinkedIn, at the time Plaxo and others, that could enable the connection and sharing to go on. And so that was the premise, to help people achieve their highest potential through connecting, sharing, and evolving.
Okay. And, while I agree that it is, gives an amazing network, how important is networking in our lives?
It's critical. And let me try to describe it this way. With the amount of data and artificial intelligence coming along, which are all network driven, you hear about Metcalfe's law and Reed's law and all these things. But it's every bit as important to have a network of people that you can talk to. Because even though artificial intelligence and robotics at one day may take away a lot of our jobs, they won't be able to take away the personal interactions that are so critical. Mm-hmm. So you want to be able to build your networks, your business networks, your social networks, all your networks to help you get to where you want to go. Okay. And it's powerful. It's very powerful.
And, when I was looking at the global leaders, you've got multiple verticals, if I can use that word. I mean, there are people who the global leaders for chairman and the global leaders for CEOs and so on. Tell me something about these verticals.
Well, I'll give you the answer two ways. One mathematically, so you kind of get that. And the second one is in principle. The principle, our thesis was that people like to connect with people that are similar to them because they'll have a better conversation. Mm-hmm. So chairmen seem to like to hang out with chairmen, board members seem to like to hang out with board members, not because of bias, but because they have common things to talk about, CEOs. They also find the same thing in industries. Healthcare guys like healthcare guys, banking folks like banking, same thing geography. Mm-hmm. So as we began building these groups, it was based around the positions people had, CEO, board members, CFO, chief technology officer, industry or sector, and geography, and then finally interest. Mm-hmm. I like green, I like diversity, I like music or arts. So the groups were set up along those lines. Now, mathematically, the reason you're doing that is you're trying to create what's called a permutation. Mm-hmm. And a permutation is defined exponentially as 2 to the x power. So every time you can connect a group with a group, it becomes exponentially 2 to the X power, more powerful. So there's 2 reasons you're trying to do it, because it matters, but 2, then you can connect the groups and create this permutation.
Okay. And I guess members, if you and I are a member of the same group, that just builds credibility for me and you to communicate better with one another. Is that what the logic is?
It's a basic logic. For example, whenever I get an email or somebody to connect or phone call, I have 2 screens in front of me right now. I've got this one and I've got that one. On this screen is your LinkedIn profile and social things. And on this screen are the investment bank databases of what boards you've been on, what you haven't. And I quickly can determine the commonality between the 2. Do we know similar people? What's your backgrounds? So you need to have both of them current. So it's critical. So, and if you're in a group together, it's just one more sense of comfort, particularly if you're not geographically close by, you're around the world. It matters a lot. I know I use it as a reference check every day.
Okay. And my next question is for the thousands of young people who will be listening to all of your words of wisdom, that, you know, when you start life, you would like to network, but people don't know how to network. I mean, you've built such amazing communities. What would your thoughts be on how can I network better?
Well, let me give you just a couple steps. In your entire life, you want to keep building skills. When you're young, particularly skills. As you start getting a little bit older, you then want to build competencies. So I know how to do engineering stuff. Now I want to prove I'm an engineer, a software engineer, or a doctor. You're building competencies. And then you begin to build your networks, your broad networks. That's what you're trying to do over a period of time in your life. So make sure your skills are good, make sure you're competent, and make sure you begin reaching out to people. But ultimately, what you're looking for is find good, smart people doing interesting things, interesting to the world and to you, and help them. And as soon as you help them, without a quid, without an expectation of doing anything for you, they'll connect with you and they'll help you. So most of it early on is make sure your skills, make sure you're competent, and help other people. They will help you. And that network begins to build pretty quickly.
Interesting. So one more question related to TGL is how important is social media to develop my networks?
I kind of break it into 2 parts. Everybody has multiple thems. You've got your business you got your family you got your friend you got your athletic you. I think social media is really critical as a forum to keep people connected and to learn.
Okay.
I'm more into the business network part of it, which is very critical, so you can reach out and talk to people that you couldn't have otherwise.
Sure.
So let me put it this way. It may not help you a lot, but if you don't have it, it's going to hurt you a lot.
Very interesting. So George, I'm going to now move to the last segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you personally. My first question is that, you know, such a senior corporate executive with Novartis, several board positions, what makes you give back so much to so many organizations?
That's a good question. Yeah, the true answer is I don't know. I think it's sort of inside of you, and you follow what makes sense to you, and you get to know people, and you want to help them out. Next thing you know, you're in. I've been on. Ashutosh and I were on the board of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunology, Gavi, the largest vaccine organization in the world, the second largest healthcare foundation in the world. How I ended up on that was just trying to help somebody out, and then you got to know Ashutosh, and it sort of goes like that. So I think you're just trying to be useful, be helpful, and just follow your nose. Good, smart people, follow your nose, and it'll take you that way. And it all links together too then.
Yeah, fantastic. And a follow-up question for that is that as you stand where you are today, you know, senior corporate executive, doing many, many things, what does success mean to George?
You know, I don't want to be the richest guy in the world. I want to be the happiest guy in the world. And to me, happy is I've made a difference and helped people. And, you know, whenever your time's up, and who knows when that'll be, it may be a year, it may be 100 years, that you can look back and say, I did the best I could do. And things are a little better than they were before I got here.
Very well said. My next question is that who or what inspires you?
that shifted over time a lot. Earlier on, of course, it's your family, your father, sometimes your brothers and sisters, and then it's people that you work with in your career. I had a chance to work with Jack Welch and some other very well-known people. In some of the foundations, I had a chance to get to know some political leaders, and they're all like Nelson Mandela and the likes. They're all inspirational.
Correct.
But ultimately, then it goes back, as you get a little older, to me, it's becoming more faith-based, because I think that there's something more than us right here. So it changes over time, but faith becomes an important part of it.
Very interesting. So I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is on failure. And I've often said, particularly from an Asian perspective or an Indian perspective, parents don't teach children it's okay to fail. And it's always be first in class, go to the head of the queue, etc., etc. Yet we fail, we learn. So my question to you, George, is what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
Well, early on, I grew up with 8 kids, 5 sisters. The first thing I learned is don't fight with your sisters because they always win. So that was a failure. You tried it a few times.
Well said.
And in your career, you're going to get bad grades in school. Just pick it up and keep going for it. I mean, like everybody, I've been fired. I've fired people. Companies have gone bad. From all those, you learn. In fact, the biggest successes I had really did come out of the failures. Things that I thought would destroy my career or whatever were actually exactly the opposite. It was the learning experience that made me interesting to other people. Because they didn't want to repeat the mistake I'd made. So if we bring them in, maybe he'll make sure we don't do the same dumb thing.
Interesting. And my last question to you, and again, this is for the thousands of people who will listen to you. What would your advice be to a young individual who's starting off on her or his journey in the corporate world?
The first thing I'd suggest starting in a corporate world is the biggest investment you're going to make is in you. It's not in that particular job. And frankly, for the first 5, maybe even 10 years, no one's going to take you very seriously anyways. So go into companies or organizations where you're working with really great people that you can learn from. Get up every morning and work really hard, and hard's defined by what else did I learn that day. And as you accumulate these experiences, you'll do quite well. But don't sleep in late, don't come in drunk, behave properly, keep learning, get into better organizations, and give back. And you'll do great. And be flexible.
Okay.
Be flexible to go into the organizations and take on the problems that no one else wants to, because what's the worst thing that happens? You get fired and you learn something. Take to learn something.
Be a risk taker.
Be a risk taker. But don't lie, cheat, steal. That doesn't end up well.
Sure. That, of course, are absolutely critical principles. I agree. George, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I just loved your comment about don't run out of money. It almost reminded me of Conrad Hilton, location.
Right.
3 times, don't run out of money. So that's an amazing principle to have for every startup entrepreneur. I also loved your comments from the global leaders, which is based on three legs, which is connect, share, and evolve. I mean, absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Great. Well, have a great day, Ashutosh, and enjoy your week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.